Please, I'm sorry, it was an accident. The scalding liquid dripped from Sarah's uniform as she stood frozen in the middle of Romano's, the city's most exclusive restaurant. Her white shirt was now a sticky mess of cola, and the crystal glass lay shattered at her feet like her dignity. Accident? The blonde woman in the designer dress laughed cruelly, her perfectly manicured nails gleaming as she gestured dismissively. You clumsy little nobody. Do you have any idea how much this dress costs? More than you make in a year, I guarantee it. Sarah's hands trembled as she tried to wipe the soda from her face, her long auburn hair now damp and sticking to her cheeks. At 38, she'd worked enough service jobs to know when customers were looking for trouble, but she'd never experienced anything quite like this public humiliation. The entire restaurant had gone silent, 40 pairs of eyes watching her shame unfold. I can pay for dry cleaning, Sarah whispered, though she knew her tips from tonight wouldn't even cover half of what that dress probably cost. Please, just tell me how much. Before we continue, please subscribe for my cause. Money? The woman's companion, a man in an expensive suit with slicked-back hair, stood up from their corner booth. Sweetheart, this isn't about money, it's about respect, and you clearly don't know your place. He picked up his own drink, whiskey on the rocks, and Sarah's eyes widened in horror as she realized his intention. The amber liquid splashed across her chest, soaking through to her skin and filling the air with the sharp scent of alcohol. There, he said with satisfaction. Maybe next time you'll watch where you're going, instead of daydreaming about lives you'll never have. The restaurant remained deadly quiet, except for the soft jazz playing overhead, a mockery of elegance while Sarah stood dripping in the middle of the dining room. She could feel tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these people who saw her as nothing more than entertainment. Is there a problem here? The voice cut through the silence like a blade, low, controlled, and carrying an authority that made every person in the restaurant straighten in their chairs. Sarah looked up to see a man approaching from the private dining area, his presence commanding attention without him having to raise his voice. He was tall, probably in his early 40s, with dark hair that was perfectly styled despite the late hour. His suit was clearly custom-made, fitting his broad shoulders and athletic build like it had been painted on. But it was his eyes that made Sarah's breath catch, steel gray and completely focused on the scene before him. No problem at all, Mr. Volkov, the man who had thrown the whiskey said quickly, his earlier arrogance evaporating. Just a clumsy waitress who needs to learn some manners. Dimitri Volkov. Sarah had heard the name whispered in certain circles, always with a mixture of fear and respect. He owned half the businesses in the city, though rumors suggested his wealth came from far more than legitimate enterprises. She'd never seen him in person before tonight, but his reputation preceded him. Brilliant, ruthless, and not a man anyone crossed twice. I see. Dimitri's gaze moved to Sarah, taking in her soaked uniform and the humiliation written across her face. Something flickered in those gray eyes. Recognition, perhaps, though Sarah was certain they'd never met. And what exactly did this waitress do to deserve such treatment in my establishment? Your establishment. The blonde woman's voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. We didn't realize you had a personal interest in Romano's. I have a personal interest in everything that happens in this city, Dimitri replied smoothly, never taking his eyes off Sarah. Especially when it involves the mistreatment of people under my protection. Now, I'll ask again, what happened here? The couple exchanged nervous glances. The man cleared his throat, his earlier bravado completely gone. She spilled water on Jessica's dress. We were just teaching her to be more careful. By humiliating her in public? Dimitri's tone remained conversational, but there was ice underneath that made Sarah shiver despite the warmth of the restaurant. By treating her like she's less than human because she works for a living? He moved closer to Sarah, and she caught a hint of his cologne, something expensive and distinctly masculine that made her suddenly aware of how she must look. Her uniform was ruined, her hair was a mess, and she probably smelled like a cocktail mixer. What's your name? He asked quietly, his voice gentler now, but still carrying that underlying steel. Sarah, she managed, surprised she could speak at all. Sarah Chen. Well, Sarah Chen Morrison. I mean, just Chen now. I got divorced last year and I'm still figuring out the name thing. She realized she was rambling and clamped her mouth shut, heat flooding her cheeks. A small smile tugged at the corner of Dimitri's mouth. Sarah Chen. A beautiful name for a beautiful woman. He turned back to the couple, and his expression hardened. Did you apologize to Ms. Chen for your behavior? Apologize? Jessica's voice climbed an octave. We're the customers. She should be apologizing to us. Should she? Dimitri's question hung in the air like a threat. Tell me, what do you do for work, Jessica? I'm between jobs right now, she admitted, lifting her chin defiantly. But my family has money. We don't need to work service jobs. Ah, so you've never had to smile while someone treats you like garbage because you need the paycheck to survive. You've never had to clean up someone else's mess while they insult everything about you. You've never had to choose between your dignity and your rent money. Dimitri's voice remained perfectly calm, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. How fortunate for you. He gestured to one of the men who had appeared silently at his side. Sarah hadn't even noticed them approach. They looked like they could handle any problem that might arise, their expensive suits doing nothing to hide their dangerous edge. Marcus, please escort these guests to the exit. Make sure they understand they're no longer welcome in any of our establishments. Wait! The man who had thrown the whiskey stood up quickly, panic creeping into his voice. You can't ban us from every restaurant in the city. We didn't know that you were... What? That she was what? Dimitri's eyes narrowed dangerously. That she was a human being deserving of basic respect? That she was someone under my protection? Or are you going to tell me that you would have behaved differently if you'd known I was watching? The silence stretched on, broken only by the soft clink of glasses from the kitchen and the increasingly uncomfortable shifting of the other diners. I thought so, Dimitri said finally. Marcus. No, please! Jessica grabbed her purse, her designer confidence crumbling completely. We'll apologize. We're sorry. We didn't mean apologize to her, Dimitri said quietly, nodding toward Sarah. Not to me. I'm not the one you humiliated. Sarah watched in amazement as the two people who had made her feel worthless just minutes ago approached her like children called before the principal. The transformation was complete, from predators to prey in the span of a conversation. We're sorry, Jessica mumbled, unable to meet Sarah's eyes. We shouldn't have. It was wrong of us to treat you that way. We were completely out of line, her companion added quickly. Please accept our apologies. Sarah looked at them for a long moment, these people who had made her feel small and insignificant, now trembling before a man who had appeared like an avenging angel. She thought about all the times customers had been rude, all the nights she'd gone home feeling worthless, all the small cruelties that came with service work. Apology accepted, she said finally, because she was better than they were, even if they couldn't see it. Dimitri nodded approvingly. Marcus, see them out. Make sure they understand that respect isn't optional in my city. As the couple was escorted away, the normal sounds of the restaurant gradually resumed. Conversations picked up, silverware clinked against plates, and the jazz music seemed to regain its sophistication. But Sarah remained frozen in place, suddenly alone with the most powerful man in the city. Come, Dimitri said, extending his hand to her. Let's get you cleaned up. I should get back to work, Sarah protested weakly, though her shift was clearly over whether she wanted it to be or not. My manager will be upset if... Your manager works for me, as does everyone else in this building. You're done for the night. His tone brooked no argument, but his eyes were kind. Please, Sarah, let me help you. Against her better judgment, Sarah found herself taking his hand. His fingers were warm and strong, and she felt a jolt of electricity at the contact that had nothing to do with static and everything to do with the man himself. He led her through the restaurant toward a private elevator she hadn't even known existed, past curious glances and whispered conversations. Sarah caught a glimpse of herself in the mirrored walls and winced. She looked like she'd been through a war zone. Don't, Dimitri said softly, noticing her expression. They should be ashamed, not you. The elevator opened directly into what appeared to be a private apartment above the restaurant. Sarah stepped into a world of luxury she'd only seen in magazines, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, artwork that probably cost more than her car, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a palace. "This is wow," she breathed, momentarily forgetting her ruined appearance. "It's convenient for late meetings," Dimitri explained, watching her reaction with amusement. "The bathroom is through there. You'll find everything you need to get cleaned up. I'll have Marcus bring you something to change into." "You don't have to. Sarah." He stepped closer, and she caught that intoxicating scent again. "When I say I'm taking care of something, I always follow through. Always." There was something in his tone that made her believe him completely. Sarah nodded and made her way to the bathroom, where she gasped at her reflection in the full-length mirror. She looked even worse than she'd thought. Her mascara had run slightly, her uniform was stained beyond salvation, and her hair looked like she'd been caught in a rainstorm. 20 minutes later, she emerged feeling marginally human again. She'd washed the sticky residue from her skin and hair and found a silk robe hanging on the door that was clearly expensive enough to pay her rent for a month. It was too big for her, but it was clean and soft and smelled faintly of the same cologne Dimitri wore. He was standing by the windows when she came out, looking out at the city lights with a glass of wine in his hand. He'd removed his jacket and tie, and the sight of him in just his white dress shirt and suit pants made Sarah's mouth go dry. "Better?" he asked without turning around. "Much. Thank you." She hesitated by the doorway, uncertain of the protocol for this situation. "I should probably go home. My neighbor is watching my daughter and—" "You have a daughter?" He turned to face her, and something shifted in his expression. "Emma. She's 15. Sarah's hand automatically went to the small pendant she wore, a gift from Emma last Christmas. "She's probably wondering where I am." "Call her," Dimitri said simply. "Let her know you're safe, but you'll be late. We need to talk." "Talk about what?" Instead of answering immediately, Dimitri moved to a cabinet and poured another glass of wine. He offered it to Sarah, who accepted it gratefully. Her hands were finally steady, but she could still feel the adrenaline from the evening's events coursing through her system. "About why those people targeted you specifically," he said finally. "About why you looked familiar to me. About why you're working as a waitress when you have a master's degree in art history from Columbia." Sarah nearly dropped her wine glass. "How could you possibly know that?" "I make it my business to know things, Sarah, especially about people who interest me." Dimitri's eyes never left her face. "You graduated summa cum laude 12 years ago. You were married to David Morrison, a financial advisor who left you for his secretary last year. You moved here from Connecticut to start over, and you've been working 3 jobs to support yourself and your daughter while you try to figure out what comes next." That's terrifying," Sarah whispered, "and incredibly invasive." "Yes, it is," Dimitri agreed without apology. "But knowledge is power, and power is the only thing that keeps the people I care about safe." "The people you care about?" Sarah's voice was barely audible. "We just met." "Did we?" Dimitri moved closer, and Sarah found herself backing toward the windows until the cool glass pressed against her shoulders. "Think carefully, Sarah. 12 years ago, Columbia University. A coffee shop near campus called The Grind." Sarah's mind raced, trying to remember. 12 years felt like a lifetime ago. She'd been young, newly engaged, full of dreams about working in a museum or gallery. The Grind had been her favorite study spot, a little place where she'd spent countless hours working on her thesis. "You were there every Tuesday and Thursday," Dimitri continued, his voice soft with memory. "Always at the corner table by the window. You drank chai lattes and you had this habit of tucking your hair behind your ear when you were concentrating." The memory hit her like a physical blow. A man at the counter, always there on the same days she was, always ordering black coffee and a blueberry muffin. Dark hair, intense eyes, expensive clothes that seemed out of place in the bohemian coffee shop. She'd noticed him because he'd noticed her, catching her eye across the room and smiling in a way that made her engaged heart skip beats. It had no business skipping. You always wanted to ask me what I was working on, Sarah said slowly, the memories flooding back. But you never did. You were wearing an engagement ring, Dimitri replied simply. And I was not someone a nice girl from Connecticut should get involved with. You were in graduate school too. Business, I think. Among other things. His smile was rueful. I had a lot of interests in those days. Sarah stared at him, trying to reconcile the memory of the intriguing stranger from her college days with the powerful man standing before her now. Why didn't you ever say anything? We saw each other twice a week for months. Because I knew that if I talked to you, I'd want more than just conversation. And you deserved better than what I could offer you then. Dimitri reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, just like she used to do in the coffee shop. I told myself I'd forgotten about you, but when I saw you standing in that dining room tonight, looking exactly like you did all those years ago, I realized I never forgot anything about you. This is crazy, Sarah whispered, but she didn't move away from his touch. You're talking about fate or destiny or something, and I don't believe in that stuff. Neither did I, Dimitri admitted. But I've built an empire on reading situations correctly, on understanding when something is worth fighting for. And you, Sarah Chen, are worth everything. The wine glass slipped from Sarah's fingers, but Dimitri caught it smoothly without taking his eyes off her face. He set it aside and placed both hands on the glass behind her, effectively trapping her against the window. But Sarah didn't feel trapped. She felt protected, surrounded by strength and certainty she hadn't experienced in years. I don't understand what's happening here, she said honestly. 6 hours ago, I was just a waitress having the worst night of her life. Now I'm in a penthouse, with a man who probably has more money than some small countries, talking about coffee shops and destiny. 6 hours ago, you were a woman who deserved better than the life circumstances had forced on you, Dimitri corrected. Now you're a woman who has choices. What kind of choices? Instead of answering with words, Dimitri leaned down and kissed her. It was soft at first, almost hesitant, as if he was giving her the chance to pull away. But Sarah found herself melting into him instead, her hands fisting in his shirt as 12 years of wondering what if finally got their answer. The kiss deepened, and Sarah felt herself coming alive in a way she hadn't in longer than she could remember. This wasn't the comfortable affection she'd shared with her ex-husband. This was fire and electricity, and the kind of connection that rewrote the rules of physics. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dimitri rested his forehead against hers. That kind of choice, he said roughly. I can't, Sarah whispered even as every cell in her body argued otherwise. I have a daughter. I have responsibilities. I can't just fall into bed with a man I barely know, no matter how good he kisses. I'm not asking you to fall into bed with me, Dimitri said, though his eyes suggested he wouldn't mind if she did. I'm asking you to let me take care of you, both of you. I don't need to be taken care of. Everyone needs to be taken care of, Sarah. The question is whether you're brave enough to let someone do it. Dimitri stepped back, giving her space to breathe and think. I'm not talking about making you dependent on me. I'm talking about giving you the freedom to choose what you want to do with your life, instead of just surviving day by day. Sarah wrapped the robe more tightly around herself, her mind spinning. What are you offering exactly? A job, to start with. I have several businesses that could use someone with your expertise. Art authentication, gallery management, cultural consultation. Take your pick. The pay would be enough to support you and Emma comfortably, while you decide what comes next. And in return? In return, you let me court you properly. Dinners, conversations, the chance to see if what we both felt 12 years ago is still there. Dimitri's smile was almost boyish. I've waited 12 years to ask you out for coffee, Sarah. I think I've earned the right to try. Courting? Sarah couldn't help smiling at the old-fashioned term. Do people still do that? I do. When something matters to me, I do it right. Dimitri moved to a desk in the corner and pulled out a business card. Think about it. Take as long as you need. When you're ready, call me." Sarah took the card, noting that it had only his name and a phone number, no business name or title. "What if I'm never ready?" "Then I'll have to accept that. But I don't think that's going to happen." Dimitri's confidence was both irritating and incredibly attractive. "You felt it too, Sarah. In the coffee shop, and definitely just now." She had felt it. She was still feeling it, if she was being honest. But feelings and reality were two different things. "I should go home," she said reluctantly. "Marcus will drive you. Your uniform." Dimitri glanced toward the bathroom where her ruined clothes were still hanging. "I'll have replacements sent to your apartment tomorrow." "You don't even know where I live." Dimitri's look was pointed, and Sarah remembered his earlier demonstration of exactly how much he knew about her life. Right. The scary information-gathering thing. She clutched the business card tighter. "This is all insane. You realize that?" "The best things usually are." Marcus appeared as if summoned, holding a garment bag that probably contained clothes worth more than Sarah's car. She changed quickly in the bathroom, emerging in a simple black dress that fit perfectly and made her feel like a different person entirely. "How did you—" "Never mind, I don't want to know." The drive to Sarah's modest apartment building was conducted in comfortable silence, with Marcus playing the part of the professional driver and Sarah trying to process everything that had happened. It felt like a dream, the kind she used to have in college about mysterious men and grand romantic gestures. "Mom?" Emma's voice called out as soon as Sarah opened the front door. "You're really late. Mrs. Patterson was starting to worry." Emma appeared in the hallway, and Sarah felt the familiar surge of love and pride she always experienced when looking at her daughter. Emma had gotten the best of both her parents, Sarah's auburn hair and delicate features combined with her father's height and confidence. "Sorry, sweetheart. We had an incident at work and then—" Sarah trailed off, realizing she had no idea how to explain the evening's events. "It was complicated." "You look different," Emma said, studying her mother with the perception that 15-year-olds seemed to possess in abundance. "And that's not your dress." "Very observant. I had to borrow it after my uniform got ruined." Sarah hung the garment bag in the closet, already feeling like Cinderella after midnight. "How was school today?" They fell into their normal evening routine, Emma chattering about her classes and friends while Sarah made tea and tried to convince herself that the last few hours had actually happened. It wasn't until Emma went to bed that Sarah allowed herself to really look at Dimitri's business card. Just his name in elegant script and a phone number. No clues about his businesses or his life beyond what she'd already known. She found herself running her fingers over the embossed lettering, remembering the way he'd looked at her, the way he'd kissed her, the way he'd made her feel like she mattered. The next morning brought reality crashing back. Sarah's manager at Romano's called to tell her she'd been given a week off with pay, Mr. Volkov's orders, and that her uniform replacements were being delivered. There was also a message from her other two jobs, both offering her similar paid time off to recover from her ordeal. "He's thorough," Sarah muttered, hanging up the phone. She wasn't sure whether to be grateful or annoyed by Dimitri's high-handed management of her life. The dress from the night before had been replaced by 3 complete outfits in her exact size, along with shoes, undergarments, and a note that simply said, "Until you decide." D. Emma raised an eyebrow at the designer clothes laid out on Sarah's bed. "Mom, exactly what kind of incident happened at work?" Sarah spent the next few days in a strange limbo, trying to decide what to do about Dimitri's offer while simultaneously researching everything she could find about him online. The results were frustratingly vague. Lots of business acquisitions and charitable donations, but very little personal information. Dimitri Volkov was apparently very good at keeping his private life private. On Thursday evening, exactly a week after the incident at Romano's, Sarah finally worked up the courage to call the number on the card. "I was beginning to think you'd decided to ignore me." Dimitri's voice was warm with amusement. "I was considering it," Sarah admitted. "This whole situation is way outside my comfort zone." "Good things usually are. Have dinner with me tomorrow night." "Dimitri, one dinner, Sarah. If you hate every minute of it, I'll back off and leave you alone. But if you enjoy yourself..." He let the sentence hang. Where? Somewhere we can talk without interruption. I'll pick you up at 7. Sarah found herself agreeing before she could think better of it, and spent the next day alternating between anticipation and panic. Emma, who had developed an uncanny ability to read her mother's moods, finally cornered her while Sarah was trying to decide what to wear. Okay, spill. What's really going on? Emma sat on Sarah's bed, looking far too mature for 15. And don't tell me it's nothing, because you've been weird all week. Sarah looked at her daughter, smart, perceptive, and surprisingly understanding for a teenager, and made a decision. I met someone, she said simply. Emma's eyes widened. Like, met someone? A guy? A man, yes. It's complicated. Complicated how? Is he married? Does he have kids? Is he ugly? Emma fired off questions like a prosecuting attorney. He's not married, no kids that I know of, and definitely not ugly. Sarah sat down next to her daughter. He's just powerful, wealthy. He lives in a completely different world than we do. So, you're smart and beautiful and amazing. Why wouldn't a powerful guy want to be with you? Out of the mouths of babes. Sarah hugged Emma tightly, grateful not for the first time for her daughter's unwavering confidence in her. When you put it like that, it sounds simple. Maybe it is, Emma said wisely. Maybe you're just making it complicated because you're scared. Maybe she was. Dimitri arrived exactly at 7, looking devastating in a charcoal gray suit and driving a car that probably cost more than Sarah's annual salary. But when he met Emma, he was perfectly polite and appropriately respectful, shaking her hand like she was an adult and asking about school without being condescending. I like him, Emma announced after Dimitri stepped outside to take a phone call. He looks at you like Dad never did. How does he look at me? Like you're the most important person in the room. Dinner was at a small Italian restaurant that Dimitri had apparently rented for the evening, giving them complete privacy to talk. The food was incredible, but Sarah barely tasted it. She was too focused on the man sitting across from her, telling her stories about his childhood in Russia, and asking about her life with genuine interest. You never told me what you actually do, Sarah said as they shared tiramisu for dessert. I solve problems, Dimitri replied diplomatically. I own businesses that help other businesses run smoothly. Import, export, logistics, security, whatever needs to be done. It was vague enough that Sarah suspected there were layers she wasn't seeing, but specific enough that she believed him. And really, did it matter? He treated her with respect. He'd shown kindness to her daughter, and he made her feel things she'd forgotten she was capable of feeling. Sarah, Dimitri reached across the table to take her hand. I want to be completely honest with you about something. Her stomach dropped. Here it comes, she thought. The catch. The reason this is too good to be true. I'm not a safe choice, he continued. My life involves certain risks, certain complications that most people wouldn't want to deal with. If you choose to be with me, there will be security considerations, privacy concerns, and probably some very boring conversations about protocols and procedures. Are you in danger? Sarah asked quietly. Not usually, but I have enemies, and anyone important to me becomes important to them by association. Dimitri's grip on her hand tightened. I would never let anything happen to you or Emma, but I need you to understand what you'd be signing up for. Sarah studied his face, seeing the sincerity there, the genuine concern for her well-being. What kind of security considerations? Bodyguards probably, background checks on people who get close to you, restrictions on where you go and when, at least until any potential threats are assessed. Dimitri's mouth curved in a rueful smile. I told you it was complicated. And if I can't handle it, then I'll make sure you and Emma are set up somewhere safe, with enough money to live comfortably, and I'll stay out of your lives. The pain in his voice was unmistakable, but I hope it doesn't come to that. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he'd told her. It should have been enough to send her running. What single mother wanted to sign up for a life of danger and complications? But when she looked at Dimitri, when she remembered how he'd defended her, how he'd made her feel cherished and protected, She realized she was already in too deep to walk away easily. "I have conditions," she said finally. Relief flooded Dimitri's features. "Name them." "Emma's safety is non-negotiable. If there's ever a situation where being with you puts her at risk, I walk. No discussion, no negotiation." "Agreed. What else?" "I want to work. Not just some make-work position you create for me, but a real job where I can use my skills and feel like I'm contributing something meaningful. I have the perfect opportunity in mind." "What else?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I want honesty. I don't need to know every detail of your business, but I need to know when something affects our lives. No protecting me by keeping me in the dark." "That might be the hardest one," Dimitri admitted. "But yes, I agree." "Then I guess we're doing this," Sarah said, hardly believing the words as they came out of her mouth. Dimitri raised her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles that sent electricity shooting up her arm. "I'm going to make you so happy, Sarah. I promise you that." 6 months later, Sarah stood in the private gallery she now managed, watching Dimitri charm a group of potential investors who were interested in funding emerging artists. He was completely in his element, confident and commanding. But every few minutes his eyes would find her across the room and soften in a way that never failed to make her heart skip. The transition to her new life hadn't been seamless. There had been arguments about security protocols, awkward conversations with Emma about her mother's famous boyfriend, and a steep learning curve as Sarah adapted to moving in Dimitri's world. But there had also been incredible moments. Watching Emma's face light up when Dimitri surprised her with tickets to see her favorite band, feeling proud as Sarah's gallery received recognition for showcasing talented unknowns, and falling more deeply in love every day with a man who never stopped trying to prove himself worthy of her trust. "You look thoughtful," Dimitri said, appearing at her elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. "Just thinking about how different everything is now," Sarah replied, accepting the drink and leaning into his warmth. "A year ago, I never could have imagined this life." "Having second thoughts?" "Never." Sarah turned in his arms, not caring that they had an audience of art collectors and critics. "I love you, Dmitri Volkov. All of you, complications and all." "Good," he murmured against her ear, "because I have something I want to ask you." Sarah pulled back to look at him, noting the unusual nervousness in his expression. "What kind of something?" Instead of answering, Dimitri dropped to one knee right there in the middle of her gallery opening, pulling out a ring box that made several nearby guests gasp audibly. "Sarah Chen," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet room. "You are the most beautiful, intelligent, brave woman I've ever known. You took a chance on a man who didn't deserve you, and somehow made him into someone who might. Will you marry me?" The ring was perfect, a classic solitaire that caught the gallery lights and threw rainbows across the walls. But Sarah barely saw it through her tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, of course I'll marry you." The gallery erupted in applause as Dimitri slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her thoroughly, dipping her back like something out of an old movie. Sarah laughed against his lips, dizzy with happiness and champagne and the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. "I love you too," Dimitri said quietly, just for her. "Thank you for taking a chance on us." "Thank you for pouring soda on me," Sarah replied, then laughed at his confused expression. "If those awful people hadn't humiliated me that night, you never would have swooped in to rescue me." "Sweetheart," Dimitri's eyes gleamed with amusement, "I would have found a way to you eventually. I'd been looking for you for 12 years. I wasn't about to give up when I was so close." "My romantic stalker," Sarah teased, but her heart was full as she said it. "Your devoted husband-to-be," Dimitri corrected, spinning her around once more as their guests cheered and photographers captured the moment that would be splashed across society pages the next day. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the gallery was quiet, Sarah and Dimitri walked hand in hand through the space that had become her professional sanctuary. Emma had already given her enthusiastic approval to the engagement over FaceTime, declaring that she'd known this was going to happen months ago and demanding to be involved in every aspect of wedding planning. "No regrets?" Dimitri asked as they stood in front of Sarah's favorite piece, a painting by a young artist whose work she'd discovered and championed. "Only that it took us 12 years to have that first conversation," Sarah replied, admiring the way her engagement ring sparkled in the soft gallery lighting. "We weren't ready 12 years ago," Dimitri said thoughtfully. "You needed to become the strong, independent woman you are now, and I needed to become someone worthy of that woman." Sarah turned to study his face, seeing the man she'd fallen in love with, and the mysterious stranger from the coffee shop all at once. "Do you really believe that? That we needed all those years apart?" "I believe that everything happens when it's supposed to," Dimitri replied, pulling her closer. "And I believe that some people are worth waiting for, no matter how long it takes." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and full of promises for the future they were going to build together. Sarah melted into him, still amazed that this powerful, complex, dangerous man had chosen her, had waited for her, had made her feel like the most precious thing in his world. When they finally broke apart, Sarah rested her head against Dimitri's chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong and reassuringly real. "I love you," she said again, because she could never say it enough. "I love you too, future Mrs. Volkov," Dimitri replied, and Sarah could hear the smile in his voice. Forever and always, no matter what comes next. And as they stood together in the gallery that represented Sarah's dreams made manifest, surrounded by beauty and love and infinite possibilities, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The waitress and the Mafia boss, the college student and the mysterious stranger, the woman who had been humiliated and the man who had defended her honor, all of their different selves united in a love that had been 12 years in the making and would last for the rest of their lives.